Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Lynda, and I'm originally from Michigan, now living in the St. Louis metro area. I'm a college coach with School Match for You and have a daughter at University of Chicago.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy has a bachelor's degree from the University of Georgia and a master's degree from North Carolina State University. She works in private practice in Raleigh as a mental health therapist. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good morning, friends. It's Christmas Eve. And I just want to say Merry Christmas. I know most people probably won't hear this till 26th, 27th, 28th, but happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Very excited right now as we speak. My wife Anitra is about to head to the airport because Karis and Joy are flying in from Raleigh. They'll be with us for the next 4 to 5 days, so we're excited here in our household. And today, I just have 2 announcements for you, and then we have 2 questions from listeners that came in that were extremely similar, so we're going to run them both on the same episode. So the first announcement has to do with a question all of us college counselors are getting bombarded with right now, especially for students that applied early decision to some of the most competitive schools. But it could be early action as well. And some students are going to get deferred at those schools. I mean, some of the schools have close to 10% admit rates in early decision. And the question is, what do I do next? So what do I do if I'm deferred? And this also applies to waitlist too. What do I do if I'm waitlisted? Which comes a little later in the regular round. And the immediate thing people want to do is just pop something off right away. And I'm going to say, hold up. Help is on the way. So originally, Dave and I, we recorded a segment that was going to run on Thursday, but that segment isn't as time sensitive. So I'm going to go with another segment that Julie and I just recorded on what to do if you're deferred and how do you write a letter of continued interest. And we do a deep dive on it. We think we answer all the main questions that you guys will have on that. This should be really good for college counselors and for parents and for students. So just wait until you hear Thursday and next Thursday's segment before you move forward. Now, there is one exception, and that is if you're at a school like, let's say, University of Chicago, Tulane, some of these schools that try to flip you from early action into the early decision 2 round, which is increasingly becoming more popular as a strategy. Sometimes those deadlines may be up on you before you can even hear the second part of our segment. But for most people, listen to that segment first. All right. I mentioned last week that Your College Bound Kid's having our first meet and greet. We're very excited about it. If we get a good turnout, we'll do it again anytime we have multiple co-hosts in one place, which is basically conferences. We're all going to be at SACAC, and NACAC is coming up in LA in September. So if there's a really good response this time, we'll seriously consider doing it in Los Angeles so that you can come out and meet Vince and the others who will be there. But I have more details for you now. So the event will be on Saturday, March 23rd from 7 to 8:30 at Kelby Farms in their clubhouse, which is an apartment complex in Durham. Now the format's going to be mingling, light refreshments, probably about a half an hour. And it's really informal. So if you're tied up and you can't get there till 7:20, pop on in. It's not really one of these things. Well, why is that dude 25 minutes late? No, it's not formal like that. So pop on in. We'll mingle. We'll meet you. We love meeting listeners. And then we'll go to, and I have to thank Lisa for this. She had this idea. Podcast trivia. Yes. We'll do a little prize giveaway with some podcast trivia, some college admissions trivia. We'll make it fun. We'll keep it lighthearted. We'll do that for, 20, 30 minutes. And then those who want to leave can leave. And those who want to stay will go back to a little bit more mingling. So pretty simple, pretty lighthearted. None of this panel stuff, casual and chill. But we hope to see you, and look for a sign-up form in January on the Your College Bound Kid website so we can know who's coming. And by the way, let me say this. I love meeting podcast listeners. 2 listeners I met this week. I'm talking about at our house. So if you're going to be in Atlanta, we get a lot of people in Atlanta. They're usually coming through for Emory or Georgia Tech or Spelman or Morehouse or UGA or Mercer. Other schools too, but those 6 have been the most popular. I will spend 20 to 30 minutes with you. I can't spend an hour and a half, and I can't drive all over Atlanta. So you are going to have to come to our house, but we have 3 really good places to meet here. If it's outside, I like to do outside. If not, we can either do the basement or my office. So just hit me up and say, I'm coming through Atlanta. Would love to meet you. And I'm happy to spend a half an hour with any podcast listener coming through the city. It's a lot of fun for me. All right, friends. So 2 questions today from listeners. Dale from DC, Robin from Kansas. And basically both asked about how we can know if a college is financially stable. And so Lisa and I answered the first one, and the second one was almost identical, came in just after we finished the recording. I'll share a few thoughts on that, and then we'll have Lynda's interview with Sue Campbell on how Zeemee helps students to understand a college culture and to connect with other students at the college or who are going to the college. So let's talk money. All right, Lisa, this is such a great question. I don't even want to do any little chit chat. I want to dive right in and take Dale's question from Washington, D.C. Does that work for you?
Works for me.
Hi, Mark. This is Dale in DC again. Not trying to submit multiple questions to you but I did have a question that came up from your recent discussion with Vince about ED and the financial realities for schools. So you've mentioned several times the importance of knowing the financial condition of the universities you're applying to, and that certainly makes a lot of sense, especially for private schools. But my question is what are the criteria we should be looking at, and where the heck can we find the data? For example, you've talked a couple of times about data like bond ratings and about endowment per student and about enrollment figures over time. And I don't know of any place I can get that, and certainly not in one place I can pull a Dun and Bradstreet report perhaps on a university and get a bond rating. I can pull the enrollment figures over time from the multiple common data set numbers, but it seems like there should be a more central or easier way of doing it. I just tried to do it on ChatGPT, by the way, and got the answer that they do not have any of that criteria for universities, and that I should contact the universities directly for that sort of information. So I'd appreciate anything you can tell us about how and where we can find the data to look at the financial conditions. Thanks as always.
All right. So Lisa, what comes to mind for you on this? It's an extremely important question. I'm sure it's a question we get asked in the counseling room sometimes directly as well. And, you throw out all these resources here and there, but I think it's helpful to have a concentrated conversation about it all at one time. Is there anything that you want to share? And then I'll supplement it with.
Sure. I mean, I use the Forbes ratings a lot because, as we all know, I am not mathematically gifted, and so like letter grades, it's a really rough, down and dirty kind of thing. But that's something that I can understand. And every year they, rate several of the colleges on what they perceive to be their financial health, and they, talk about what their formula is and the data inputs that go into it. I also found something called mapsproject.org. I don't know if you're familiar with that, Mark.
I'm actually not. So talk to me about it.
Yeah. Well, it's put out by, I think, the University of Utah, and it compiles a lot of different data, and it also combines them with like student data. And then they use that for 3,000 colleges.
Wow.
And it's interactive, I guess, and it's sector specific. So you can compare like 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges, private colleges, public colleges, and for-profit colleges. And it changes like over time. So when they get new data, it changes. And so this is an effort that is put out, I think, by the Sorensen Impact Center at the University of Utah in terms of trying to promote more college knowledge and equity. So they're trying to make this information available to everyone so people can look into that. So, and they also talk about Forbes college financial grades and also the composite financial index, which is something that condenses a lot of information about colleges into 4 ratios, and they use that. And they also recommend the Admit College Financial Health Center. And Admit is, I think you've had somebody from Admit on the
We had Tuition
podcast
Fit.
back in the
So Tuition Fit and Admit are like two, to use this word, I don't want to use the word competitors, although I guess that's true, but they both do almost exactly the same thing. So that's the reason why I haven't had Admit on. I'm like, well, we kind of had Tuition Fit, and they're both really, really similar.
All right, they're so similar that I conflated them in my mind. But they put out a financial health model that has 937 private institutions. So they look at private colleges. And then the Heckinger report, which we use a lot for our articles in the news segment, isn't generally a great thing for anyone to read who's interested in education. They also put out ratings about colleges and their financial health. So those are some of the things that I try to look at. And I understand them at varying degrees of success, but I'm curious to see what you use.
Well, before I get in, I'm super excited that I feel like you just helped me out in a massive way with this mapsproject.org. And I know what I'm going to be doing this afternoon, diving into that. Well, one thing that caught my attention was how many colleges are included in their database. So, yeah, so I know what I'm doing this afternoon. But just to reiterate, I really want to talk a lot about 2 of the sources that you mentioned and just let people know a little bit more about how they come up with their data. And so the Forbes financial tracker that Lisa talked about, like it really looks at several things. It does have 906 colleges that are ranked. So that's one thing that I like, these ones that have more than 2,000, so it caught my attention, in it. And it draws off data that is available in National Center for Educational Statistics, which you can go in and look at yourself. But I mean, and it was implied in Dale's question, like it's a lot of work to pull all these things in and put them together, and you know what I mean? And so they have a methodology for how for what they look at, and it is formula driven. And like any formula thing that's formula driven, you might quibble with their formula, but I think it's fairly sound in my opinion, because they actually look at a total of 19 variables altogether. And so let me just go into a little bit of detail of what's in there. So they look at endowment assets per, and this is a term you'll see, FTE. That should have used that for an admissions vernacular. We used to always use that term at Westtown. It's an acronym that stands for full-time equivalent. And so, because you want to look at, it's basically per student, but you're focusing on full-time students, right? So it's an endowment per student. And that's really important because we know for private schools in particular, they're heavily endowment dependent. Otherwise, let me restate that. Unless they have an endowment, they're completely tuition dependent. You're completely tuition dependent. You get a hurricane and have a lull in your tuition, like COVID-19 or something, can really cause problems. And so it's a real important statistic for for private schools in particular. And in their formula, that counts for 15% of their model. And then they have something else that they refer to as the primary reserve ratio. And this is also 15%. So basically what this ratio does is it measures liquidity. So it looks at, your assets and how much of them could you tap into if you needed them. Because you have expendable assets, and then you have restricted assets. When you're looking at things related to debt and property, plant, equipment. So it's a complex financial model. It looks at things like, accumulated depreciation and all this stuff. And it's an example of why it's good to have sort of a source that does most of the work for you, because my head was spinning just trying to follow exactly what this primary reserve ratio is. But it gives us, like Lisa says, you get letter grades. So you'll see D, you'll see A plus. A plus is going to be
That's
like
speaking my language. Great.
It's going to be really strong. And then they also have something that they call viability ratio. So this is a metric that looks at the expendable assets, but it divides them by the total liabilities. So similar to the primary reserve ratios measurement, it looks at annual expenses. And they say schools with a ratio of at least 2.5, they get the highest credit. So, and they list several schools in that category every time they do this. Then they look at something called core operating margin. This also gets 10%. So this measures whether tuition, donations, and investment revenues, whether they cover the school's educational expenses by subtracting its core expenses from its core revenues and dividing the difference. And they always give examples as well of people, like, for example, Smith was the only women's college that got an A+ because of its operating margin of 40%. Then, unfortunately, one of the schools my cousin I went to her graduation in Minnesota, Bethel, had a negative margin. And so they kind of call out examples. And the nice thing about the tracker is you can just search for a school in the search and that you're interested in. You don't have to go scroll through some big 900 list. You can scroll for a school and pull it up. Then the last main thing, once again, there's 19 variables, but these are the big ones. I think we might be putting some people to sleep here with this one, Lisa. It's very technical. It's very technical.
I'm listening. I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. So they do look at tuition as a percentage of core revenue. So this looks at diversified revenue streams that really make any organization more secure. Once again, seeing who's generating revenue outside of just tuition, with the idea that you're really vulnerable if you're completely depending on tuition, kind of like what I said earlier, you get the hurricane or tornado and wow, can you survive? And so if tuition accounts for less than 5% of revenue, you get the highest in the highest grades. And there were actually only 14 colleges that were in that category. So I really like that. Oh, you know what? I think I called, did I call it financial fitness tracker earlier? I think I did. I think I conflated that with Heckinger's name for their list, for their thing. I think it's just called college financial grades. Yeah, let me correct that. I think I called that when we were talking earlier, Lisa, the financial fitness tracker. And I really should have just called it financial grades. Forbes produces their every year. Like, you can just search Forbes 2023 college financial grades. That's what you want to look up if you want to just do a search to pull that up. For the financial fitness tracker, it's the other resource you mentioned that's really, really good, which is Heckinger Report. And what I really like about the job they do is that their database is a lot bigger. They have 2,662 schools in their database. And they refer to it as a stress test. So their formula was, a lot of research went into it. It was developed by Robert Zemsky, who's a University of Penn professor, and Susan Shaman, who's the former director of institutional research at Penn, and Susan Campbell, who's a former provost at Middlebury. And what their methodology does is it draws on a uniform set of federal data that most schools have reported for over a decade, and it allows public and private schools to be scored using similar standards, which is really good because it's very difficult to compare public and private schools because of the fact that, public schools are getting so much more state money and federal money. And then, of course, private schools are so much more endowment dependent. And so it really allows a uniform school standard to be used. Now, their system does not include for-profit schools, but I think most of our listeners aren't really focusing on for-profit schools. But you can look up, and you should look up any schools you're looking at and see how they do in the stress test. So what do they look at? Well, they look at enrollment. So instead of Dale having to go look up, all the trends from year to year, they factor obviously enrollment, because tuition still continues to be the number one source of revenue. Retention is really important. If you bring them in, but they're going out the door right away, that's a problem. They look at something that colleges talk about a lot internally. If you're talking to schools about money, you'll hear them talk about net tuition revenue. That's an extremely important figure that is always bandied around with any financial conversation at schools. They just call it average tuition revenue, also known as net tuition revenue. And then they do look at an endowment to spending ratios. So they don't just look at it. See, so if you look at Harvard, they have a crazy sick endowment, but they spend a boatload of money too. Some of it is how their professors are very well paid. And so, so I think it's good. They look at endowment per spending ratios. And then for public four-year colleges, the metrics they use are enrollment, retention, average tuition revenue per student, and state funding. So basically, they're subbing out the enrollment data for the state funding data. And that's what allows them, to compare things. And they do have public two-year colleges in the Hechinger report as well. And for public two-year colleges, they're looking at enrollment, state and local funding, and the ratio of tuition revenue to instructional costs. So those are like the best two sources I know for everything. And now I got to go check out mapsproject.org and see if I like it as much as those, but it's another one in the mix. I will say all three of your major financial ratings institutions do get involved in rating colleges. So the main three are S&P Global, Fitch, and Moody. In fact, I want to talk at some point, maybe have somebody come on and talk more about this, because one of the things that has caused schools to be very rankings conscious is a metric that goes into some of these bond rankings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is. And so, and so now and for those of you not following me, so most colleges have some type of usually capital campaigns going on. I remember when we were at Westtown and we hadn't done one in a long time. I think it was like 25 million or 50 million or something like that. And so you're borrowing money to expand your facilities. Well, the cost of money, just like going for a mortgage, the best way to think of it is if you think of your own credit score. Your own credit score is going to impact your interest rate when you go borrow money. Well, it's the same thing for colleges. Like their bond rating impacts how much it costs them to borrow money. So that's, all three of them. You can usually Google search them if you're interested in that. Some of the formulas that we've talked about do factor bond ratings in. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, Forbes looks at that as one of their 19 metrics. I'm pretty sure I'm correct on that. Somebody can correct me if I'm not. Our listeners are sharp. Believe me, they are like white on rice. They will know. They will know. Yeah, but it's awesome that they're that way. So, the last thing that I wanted to share, and it is really important, and this question really just creating more urgency. I've said in this past I'm going to do it, but I'm going to really move it up, is I really, in 2024, I'm going to have an expert come on and break down how to read financial statements, because that's another thing. So yeah, you can go to these aggregate sources, but for example, if you're using Forbes, they have 900 schools. Well, that's less than half the four-year nonprofit schools out there. So yeah, they have the big ones and the main ones, but there's a chance the school you want to look up won't be there. So I'm looking forward to that. Now, if you never heard my interview with Dr. Roger Parrott, you can just go look up Dr. Roger Parrott. That was probably, I would say it was probably about a year and a half ago now. But he talked about on that interview, the very first thing he does when he's looking at any school is go to the financial statement, and he talks about exactly where he goes on the financial statement and what he looks for. So Roger Parrott is the president of Belhaven University in Jackson, Mississippi. And once again, you can find all of our interviews by just going to yourcollegeboundkid.com. And probably the easiest way would just be to go to the search bar and put in Roger Parrott. And it's spelled Parrott, 2 R's, 2 T's. So, he's like the only person in America where his father and his grandfather were both college presidents.
Yeah, I
So,
remember that. It's
remember
quite the
that?
legacy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He really is. And he's just a pretty awesome guy. It's a really good interview if you haven't heard it. But he talks about exactly where he goes on the financial statement. So if you don't, it's gonna probably be 6 months before I can get that on and get scheduled. So if you want just to have something immediately, I'd encourage you to go listen to that. And it's not that long of an interview, but one thing about our interviews, if you go to yourcollegebondkid.com and then you click the link, it gives you the breakdown of the content in order. So if you look and you see 15 bullet points and it's bullet point 8, you can jump around and say, oh, it's probably around the middle. And then you can listen to something. That's if you don't feel like hearing the whole interview. You want to go right to the spot. We don't have timestamps for everything, but it is listed in order and it should be pretty quick for you to find that segment. It's about 3 minutes. He talks about it. So friends, after I was editing this episode, I thought about it and I thought, people are very well-intentioned. A lot of people heard me talk about the Roger Parrott interview, and they're going to think, that's a great idea. But you're driving your car, you're walking your dog, you're on a treadmill. It's just not going to happen. So I thought I would share the highlights of what Roger shared in that interview. And if you're a fan of our admissions vernacular, you're getting 2 of them today, even that it's not even a Thursday. The first is GuideStar.com. You're going to want to go to GuideStar.com. And the second is 990. When you go to GuideStar.com, you're going to want to look up a school's 990. All right? Now, I know what some of you are thinking. What the heck is GuideStar.com and 990? Well, GuideStar is your premier destination for data on any nonprofit organization. Doesn't have to be a school. And it is a reservoir of info. And 990 is the primary IRS tool that they use for gathering information on nonprofits. But the 990 is also the primary way nonprofits share their data to the public. So, and I think for both Dale and Robin, I feel 100% confident from your questions. You're going to love swimming around in here. So what you're going to do when you go to GuideStar.com is take out a free account. Yes, I did say free. And you can see 3 years of 990 forms. All right, so that's the first thing. Now, here's what Roger says. He says this is the very first thing he does for any private school, college, university that he learns about to immediately assess their financial health. You go to GuideStar.com, you look up the 990, and what you're going to do is you're going to compare the operating budget to the capital expenditure. Now, according to Roger, the operating budget needs to be at least twice the capital expenditures or the school is in financial trouble, right? So the capital expenditure just shows you how much they spend in the course of a year. And it's laid out and you can see where the money is spent as well. And so it's a real simple trick. Schools that are not at least double their operating budget compared to their capital expenditure, buyer beware. So that's another one for you. But there's so much other really, really good information in those 990s. The other thing, and Roger mentioned this as well, look at whether the school's running a surplus or a deficit. And that information is right on the bottom of the first page. So now during COVID, some schools struggled a little bit that are back in good standing. Now, I thought, let me just fool around in here a little bit and share some stuff with you. So, of course, it's much better for private schools than public schools. The first thing I'm going to think about is where my kids went to school. Well, Joy went to public schools, University of Georgia, North Carolina State, Karis independent or private school, Davidson College. So for Davidson, now mind you, they have an A+ Forbes rating, right? This is they were one of 15 schools when Karis went there that was need blind, met 100% of need without loans in the whole country. Now the group's a little larger. But Davidson has assets, like 1.8 trillion in assets, and the liabilities like 161 million. So if you were to divide the liabilities into the assets, they have almost 12 times the assets as the liabilities, just as one indication of their financial health to look at. Now, one thing that that Roger Parrott says is don't get caught up at looking at appreciated assets because they can be manipulated, but focus on operating budget. Now, by the way, there's a lot of other good stuff in GuideStar. Like you can look up the salaries of the highest paid employees. So this is public knowledge. I'm not saying anything that's not out there. So I was curious. Well, Chris Gruber, he's one of the top pros in the business. He's been doing this 40 years. At Richmond for almost 20 and Davidson for about 20. Over their office. What does he get? Well, it's right in there. $255,000. He's the ninth highest paid employee. Sorry, Chris, but it's public knowledge. And you can see the highest paid employee, the president in Davidson's case, all the way down. You can look all that up. So there's a lot of other really fascinating stuff. So I strongly encourage you to go there and to look at that information. And I am going to have more to say about this next week. So come back next week for even more details. So those are my thoughts. Anything else, Lisa?
I think you've done a very exhaustive job. I hope that is helpful for Dale. And I'll be interested to hear what you think about mapsproject.org after you.
I liked what I heard.
Yeah,
I liked what I heard. Well, for me, there's several things I always want to look at. I always want to look at your methodology, and I always want to see where you're getting your data from. You know, and anytime I like having multiple sources, it almost reminds me of college rankings. One of the things that I'm going to say to people is if you are one of these people that likes to use college rankings, please do two things. Please check the methodology out because you may not agree with the methodology at all. Like when I look at the best places to live, rankings, and I look at the methodologies, I don't agree with some of them. And I don't agree with a lot of the things in the college rankings methodology. Like for the longest time, U.S. News didn't have anything at all to do with diversity at all in their rankings, which was ridiculous. Most people find aspects of diversity to be important. And the other thing besides reading the methodology is please consult multiple ones. You need to consult multiple ones because it really will help to decrease the perception. Oh, that school's number 5. And then you go somewhere else and it's number 35. And it really helps you to realize, oh, this stuff's quite subjective. And so those are the two things that I say to people. If you're going to use rankings, please check multiple rankings, at least 4 or 5 for college. And there's so many out there now, you won't have a hard time finding 4 or 5 different ones. And please read the methodology. So that's the first thing I do on something like this. Let me go read the methodology and the sourcing. I know we got in the weeds today, but it's a kind of really important question, actually.
Right.
Because I feel really strongly about this. Some of you know my story. I did a year of college admissions in Dallas, Texas in the early 90s. And the school literally closed when I was working there. It literally financially closed. I was out of a job. I'll never forget that meeting. We need to talk. You go. And so I knew we were on like thin string. I mean, you have to be like, have your head in, the middle of whatever to not know that we were struggling. So that always scarred me. And then when I went to Westtown, it was quite loaded, like $100 million endowment for 350 kids in high school. Like that's more than lots of colleges.
Mm-hmm.
This wasn't what like Phillips Exeter had and some of the wealthiest of the wealthiest, but it was still like night and day. And so that is something that I actually really take a look at for my own kids and for people I'm looking at, is because to me, it really does have a lot of ramifications. It's not just survival.
No, it's their day-to-day life as a student.
Correct. Yeah. It's your day-to-day life as a student. So, for example, I just thought of another source, Lisa. What's that college transitions book?
Oh, College is Worth Your Money?
Yes. College is Worth Your Money has some really good data.
Mm-hmm. They do, yeah.
Because they'll look at things like what is the ratio of people that work in the career center to the number of students?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They'll have data like that in there, right? And what you'll find is all of the schools that have like the lowest ratio of, counselors in the career center to students, they're all the ones that are like the financially healthiest. Because you can just, like Lisa says, it's your day-to-day life as a student. You can just invest so much more. So Lisa's always talking about how strongly she feels about schools neglecting mental health, as a resource. And I've shared this before on the podcast. I spent a week getting digital admissions training in 2019 at Stanford. And when I was there, the biggest complaint when I talked to students was mental health, but they were hiring 40 more mental health counselors. Well, there'd be another school that might have the same problem, but they'd be thrilled if they could hire 4. They might not even be able to hire 1.
Yeah.
So it impacts academic supports. It impacts residential life. It impacts how much, I'll tell you a big area it impacts. It impacts whether or not you can have full-time professors and benefits, something we probably haven't talked about as much as we should, but we've talked about it once I can remember, this move toward hiring a bunch of adjuncts all the time instead of full professors. It kind of reminds me of it's not a good example because I think there's a place for this, but one of the big reasons why colleges hire seasonal readers as opposed to more admissions staff is you can pay somebody $25 to $30 an hour, have them work 3 or 4 months, and it's only a fraction of what you'd have to pay if you hired sometime full-time with benefits. Now, I think there's a great place for the seasonal reader, so I'm not putting that down, but the point is it's a cost savings way of getting applications read, right? And the equivalent of that for faculty is to go with a bunch of adjuncts. And so you'll see your adjunct to faculty to full-time professor ratio. We had a listener actually that wrote in about a week or two. And they were talking about they came from a background in some of this stuff, and they said that's one of the first things they look at is the full-time professor to adjunct ratio. So, and then all your academic support services, dorm. Let me stop because we'll go on for hours about it. Basically, money impacts everything. Not telling you anything you guys don't know.
Right. Yeah. Money makes the world go round, and it makes your college. Even just simple things like I've seen colleges on campuses that are less funded, let's say, and the landscaping isn't as good.
Yeah.
Carpet needs cleaned. Paint is chipping. I mean, those things just they're not a big deal, but they do create an atmosphere of, I don't know, dreariness or that can affect people's psychology, I think, in ways that we don't always understand. So,
and sometimes they're a symbol too. A lot of times they're a signal. Yeah, one thing I found this when I was at West End, I had no idea how expensive deferred maintenance is. You literally, your school could have $100 million in deferred maintenance that needs to get addressed, or 10 million. And so, where does the money go? It's everything. It could even be food quality. It's just all kinds of things. It doesn't stop. Yeah. So we would encourage everybody to check out the financial health for any school you're even considering looking at. We think these are some sources that will help you. We'd love to have some listeners write in and tell us what you think if you check out these sources. Yeah. Thanks, Lisa. You gave me my homework for today. Check out mapsproject.org. Thank you. Okay, friends, hopefully you found that question helpful that Dale sent in, and listen to Robin now as she asks a very similar question.
Hi, Mark. This is your longtime listener, Robin in Kansas. Every week, it seems there are headlines about a higher ed institution that is in some form of financial trouble. I assume that the looming enrollment cliff will only increase the frequency of such stories. Since most of us view college as one of the biggest investments we will make for our families, it's important to know upfront that we're investing in a financially healthy institution. I have always used Forbes magazine's annual financial grading article as a starting point. Private schools are graded on a scale from A+ all the way down to F. The Forbes online search tool is updated every year, and it's usually free to non-subscribers. However, I would like to know what your recommended resource would be for assessing a school's financial viability. There's a second part to my question, and that is, how low would you advise we dip down on that grading scale? For those of us who do not qualify for need-based aid and are chasing merit money, we're going to find that many of the most generous schools have a C financial rating or below. A-plus schools generally do not award much merit. So this is a real conundrum for merit chasers. Thanks for all you do and keep those health updates coming. I enjoy following your progress.
Okay, Robin, I just want to get at your question about what grade is a bad grade, because the rest of your question, I feel we answered with Dave's question. So for me personally, I don't like to see C's or C minuses, especially C minuses. I did run a whole bunch of colleges because, Forbes financial health grades, they let you just punch in any college in the search feature. And I specifically punched in some schools that I know are struggling financially, and they would be consistently getting C and C minus grades. A couple of them even got B grades. So that's the first thing. I don't like those. For me personally, I'm conservative. And because I got burned. I mean, you heard the story. I was literally working at a school in Dallas, Texas, Phillips College, doing admissions there, and the place closed on us while I was working. So it shows how good of a job I was doing in admissions, right? So it burned me so badly, I never returned for another 10 years before I came back to the profession. But to me, it's really important. So I really look at financial health when I was looking at this for my kids, and I also do it for my families. So I would say, though, that as good as Forbes is, you don't want to just use one source. It's not the be all and end all. So if I saw a school I really liked and it had a C grade and it gave a really, really great merit package, to me, C would be like, okay, it's like a mechanic who sees a warning signal, like, okay, look under the hood more carefully. And then you can go to the 990. Because the nice thing about Forbes, Hechinger, and sources like that is very quickly you can get a read really quickly. Like, in 30 seconds, you can look up a school. So it's nice for the speed. And I honestly can't say I've ever seen a grade that I really disagreed with. Not that I know the financial health. But I think they do a really good job. But when you want to dig deeper, that's when you want to go to the financial statement. And it's always about risk reward, right? Like if you're getting this unbelievable scholarship, maybe you consider it. Although I had a family tell me a really cool story this week. It's a family I'm working with, and the dad had an option to go to Whittier College for law school. Now, Whittier doesn't have law school anymore, which speaks to the financial challenges there. But they did. And dad's in his 50s, maybe even 60s. So he also had an offer to go to UCLA. And he was going to have to pay full. So he really had a hard time. I could go to Whittier for free, or I could pay to go to UCLA. And he literally went in and had a meeting with a professor who he knew at Whittier, and asked him, what would you do? And the professor said, go to UCLA. So money's not everything. But anyway, the reason I thought about that story is it wasn't just the full ride. Whittier literally offered to have a student carry his books to school for one day a week. That's whatever you want to call that. Unique, I'll use that word. In your offer, we'll have somebody carry your books to class one day a week. Yeah, they did things a little differently back then. So it's not the only thing that you want to look at. You want to look at multiplicity of sources, but I don't know if I should name names or not. I'll name one name because it's been really publicly written about. Birmingham Southern. It's a known fact that Birmingham Southern is really struggling financially, and they've got a C minus grade. So there you go. As for your other comment, Robin, thank you, because as a podcaster, I know there's a certain connection with the audience, and so you want to have a little personal content, but you're on here for college admission. So striking the right balance is not always easy. But I will tell you, I'm going to continue to do these updates. For this month, I'm hoping to just lose 1 pound, honestly, because Karis is about to come in and she can cook a storm up. And I'll go back hard at it in January. But even when I reach my goal, I plan on continuing to do these updates, partly because you guys like them and partly because I need the accountability. Well, thank you, Robin. Thank you, Dale, for your great questions.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, hopefully you caught first part of Lynda's interview with Soup Campbell. In part 2, Lynda asked Soup, how does Zeemee get the word out to students about their services? Soup answers the question, who is moderating the chat rooms? Soup talks about how full moderation control works at Zeemee. Soup talks about whether Zeemee students are also on Insta, Snapchat, and Discord. Lynda asks Soup whether there's a uniform standard for denouncing things like hate speech and foul language, or does each school create its own standards? Soup discusses how the roommate matching process works with Zeemee. And finally, Soup talks about how Zeemee creates friend groups. Listen and enjoy.
And because you sync up your data with the college, it sounds like the invites for most of your users are actually coming from the college. So the colleges are reaching out to the students. How else are students finding? I mean, I know you're on the app or on the app store, but are high school counselors suggesting the app as a way to get an idea of the culture of a school, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, when we talk about user adoption or that discovery of finding Zeemee, again, for the most part, the vast majority of new users on Zeemee start at that high school senior year, right? It's kind of, I always describe it as it's when the light bulb goes off for a student that's like, oh, my life's going to be changing here soon and I'm going to make a transition. Now, that could be in the junior year, right? But primarily it really happens for high school seniors. So when it comes to kind of discovery and user adoption, I would say the number one way is what you mentioned. Colleges and universities, they have their leads, right? They have student information, they have inquiries who they know. And so they will invite, right? So, and we actually at Zeemee do that on behalf of the schools as well. So, every month we'll send out kind of a text message invite to the students that the schools are telling us, these are the students we really want to invite. We really want them to kind of know us and join us. And so that's primarily the way that a lot of new users find Zeemee. But as you mentioned, I think too, really over the past couple years, Zeemee hit a critical mass where this thing just exploded in popularity. I mean, there's millions of students on the app now. I think about a month ago, we hit number 12 in the App Store, which is absolutely insane that this little app and this little team of higher ed folks and those of us that work at Zeemee decided we want to build a new social platform, and all of a sudden it's number 12 in the App Store. So there's that level of, once it kind of hits critical mass like that, there's just a word of mouth of our virality. High school seniors are talking at lunch at school like, oh my gosh, I was on this Zeemee thing. Are you on there? They're making TikToks about Zeemee. So I think that's really helped a lot as well. And I do think we do still have some of our amazing champion friends on the high school side that have seen the evolution of Zeemee, that know, kind of our heart and our mission about how much we care about these students. And I think we still have those advocates and evangelists for us, like, on the ground level there, like helping guide their students and, telling their students, hey, here's another great resource, you guys. You should hop on Zeemee and make those connections. It'll really help in your transition. So we are always thankful for those folks on the high school side that continue to make sure students know who we are.
So you talked about some of the things that students are posting. Who's moderating these chats? Is there someone from each college who's in there answering questions, guiding conversation? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a big one and super important to us. So when a college or university partners with Zeemee, one of the things they do is they have dedicated members of their staff, as college reps that now begin to play an active role in the community with the students. And then they also will select some of their rock star current students to play a role in this experience with all the prospective students as well. We know it's really valuable. We know prospective students love to see what life is like through the lens of a current student. So all of the, and on Zeemee, we call those the school's official influencers, right? I know that's kind of a loaded term. Like, we're not talking TikTok influencers here, but that's the kind of formal name we give to those like hand-selected current students. So all of those official influencers and all of those official college reps have full moderation controls, right? So there's a lot of things. They can delete anything. They can, remove any student from their community and prevent that student from ever being able to re-access the community. They have all those full moderation controls. But what I'm even more proud of and what I like even more is the commitment that we've made at Zeemee to just building this new type of social that is extremely safe and inclusive for all of our students on the app. And so our engineering team has actually created some really sophisticated proprietary safety features within our app that just prevents a lot of the things we could think about, like that could really go wrong, of even preventing that content from ever even being surfaced in chat. We really take that serious. And again, that's another one of those differences between us and Meta or TikTok or Snap. Again, when your focus is we care about the student more than anything else, then you're going to build those safety features. You're going to invest the time. Other platforms, that's not their top. That's not at the top of the list for what's important to them. And so they don't always invest the time and resources to build those safety features. So yeah, we want to make sure, listen, I say this all the time. I've done this for a long time working in social media with teenagers. It's not if something's going to happen. We need to always have the mindset of when something's going to happen, and then all of the tools in place to know how to handle those situations. And so we're very lucky. We don't have a lot of issues on Zeemee. Believe it or not, these young people are very smart. They know that this is a shared platform with adults on the platform. They always want to, have side conversations on Snap and Insta, Discord, because they know they can do things on those platforms that they just can't do on Zeemee. And so, yes, we are very committed to making sure everyone has those moderation capabilities and that we keep this experience extremely safe, and every type of student out there can feel welcome and feel like they've got a place on this app. That's really important to us.
So are the guidelines school specific or Zeemee specific? And I'm just curious, each school has different culture, what may be termed hate speech at one school, maybe not another. So is the school have complete control over that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that's a great question with some things we're seeing happening in the world right now at some of our colleges and universities. So Zeemee, we have our own terms of service with how students can behave on this app, right? And it's pretty strong in all of those categories of what we consider, hate speech and the protected groups that just we will not allow any attacks on any protected group. And so that is all clearly in Zeemee's terms of service. Now, as we all know, virtually every college and university has these same things in place for their institution as well. So it's kind of a twofold thing that happens, right? So you are 100% correct. Every college and university, their community on Zeemee has kind of a different feel and a different vibe because it is very reflective of their actual real community. That's there. And we want students to kind of feel that. We want students early on to get a sense of what this community is really like. And so, those schools know what they allow and what they don't allow. Now, I'll give a more simplistic example, right? Let's say that a very large public university that uses Zeemee, that are literally, there's thousands and thousands of chat messages every single day in their community. And the general chat channel I always describe as like a high school senior hallway, right? Now, students may be using certain language, right? They might use a cuss word and how they're just talking with each other, but that might be in the context. It's not hurtful. It's not targeting anyone. It's just very much like that's how they're talking with each other. So one college or university may say, look, that's fine. We just know that's just young people talking with each other the way they talk. They're not being hurtful. They're not targeting anyone. But we might have a small, private, conservative, faith-based partner school on Zeemee that for them, they might say, look, we do not know, we don't allow any cuss words in any of our, chat channels. And so again, a lot of that we do put in the hands of the college and university to really reflect kind of where they stand on things. But we at Zeemee do not hesitate that when a student violates our terms of service, whether that violated the schools or not, they're removed from the platform and basically banned from the platform and can never create another account using that same mobile number. So we have no problem removing any student that wants to violate and step into those grounds that we know is just 100% unacceptable.
Okay. So you mentioned influencers, and you're right. I feel like that's kind of a loaded term when talking about social media,
Yep.
particularly for young people. And I've had students who have joined a school's official Instagram for the class of, 27 or whatever.
Yep.
And if they are not living their life out on social media and, traveling to exotic places and doing all of the cool things, it can be really intimidating. Does it get that way on Zeemee?
Yeah. So the cool thing and what I love about Zeemee when it comes to those current college students serving in that role as the school's kind of official influencers. And honestly, we could really interchange the word ambassador there, right? So we label it as influencer, but it's not what we think of as Instagram or TikTok influencers. But the way this works on Zeemee, which is really, really cool, is very different than on, say, Instagram, right? So like we know every college or university has an Instagram account, their official Instagram account. What we also know about those accounts is someone in marketing communications is the gatekeeper of that account at the college or university. It's extremely branded, curated. It's perfect, beautiful content, because again, that's how they're leveraging. It's more about us and our brand. And so we're kind of talking about us and so, for example, maybe every once in a while, the school will do something fun like a student takeover, where they do kind of showcase the student experience through their Instagram account. But even that is planned, curated, approved. One of the things that's really different on Zeemee is when the college or university on Zeemee selects those handful of students to represent them, and we flip that switch and give them that official influencer status, they're able to post content whenever they want. There is no gatekeeping. And on Zeemee, again, there's no filters. There's no like editing capability of your, yes. So it's like, it's so authentic, right? And that's prospective students are just saying, look, we get it. We know you're going to showcase the beautiful stuff on your Instagram account. We know your socials, you're trying to really market and sell your school. What we would love is we'd love to just see what's really going on. Like we'd love, like through the student experience, just show us what's happening. And so when I train a lot of the college student influencers and prepare them to be on Zeemee, this is what we talk about. It's like, it's not really about selling your school. You might not even be on campus. You might be on break at home. And you might just want to show like, you guys, I'm back home and I've got to show you like my go-to restaurant. This is where I get my comfort food. So on Zeemee, the content is relational. The goal isn't sell the school. The goal is I want you to see through my experience just how things are here. And I want it to be real and relational. I saw a student influencer a couple of weeks ago. She posted a video. She's sprinting across campus. It's pouring down rain. She does not have an umbrella or like a jacket. And she's basically like, you guys, this is a total fail. This is why you should wake up in the morning and know the weather before you head out to class. And like, that's just real, right? It wasn't really anything about the school. And so I love that on Zeemee. And the big thing about Zeemee too is content is not why students are on Zeemee. So again, if we want to compare those other socials to Zeemee, on Instagram, on TikTok, on Snap, like whatever, content creation is required for engagement. And so that's not how it works on Zeemee. Students got on Zeemee because they want to chat with each other. So colleges also don't have to feel the pressure of, I've got to produce content or there won't be any engagement. On Zeemee, the content is just a value add of really letting prospective students see the authentic experiences that their current students are having.
And I know as a counselor, that's one of the things I'm always trying to get students to do is to get a sense of a school outside of the marketing department, because the brochures, they all look amazing. Everyone's on the
Yep.
quad. It's a beautiful sunny day. There's a dog, there's a frisbee. The emails are overwhelming. So anytime you can get real about a school, it's valuable. So I like that. Um, how Now I know one of the things that I've seen on Zeemee is it's a way to choose roommates. Do you find that's happening a lot?
Yes. One of the most popular features on Zeemee is the roommate matching feature. There's probably today, I would venture to say 90% of high school seniors that are transitioning into college are using Zeemee to find potential roommates. And it's really cool the way it works on Zeemee. So it's very basic. It's kind of just built into the entire Zeemee platform. But students do this little 10-question quiz, right? And again, with 10 questions, it's the most basic it can possibly be. But it's some of those typical housing survey questions. Are you messy? Are you neat? Are you a night owl? Or do you, it's some of those questions we've all seen on housing surveys. But the cool thing about when you do this on Zeemee is thousands and thousands of other seniors or admitted students to that school have done it. And so once you do that quiz, and again, it gives them a disclaimer, this is not official. This is not, you're always going to work through your college or university. But then right there in the app, you instantly see all of your matches and the profiles from those students. So it'll show you who you were 100% match with. It'll start to drop down. Now I'm a 92% match. And so students on Zeemee then are instantly direct messaging each other and like, oh my gosh, like I was looking at your profile, we were 100% match. Just thought we could get to know, start chatting, so that as they get to that point where the colleges give them that option somewhere, where they're able to both indicate that we would prefer to room together. Now they're able to do that because months ahead of time, they found that just perfect person that they feel like we're a really good match and we want to room together. So yes, that is one of the most popular features on Zeemee. And again, our data shows that is a very stressful part of the transition. And so, students knowing that they can have that connection way ahead of time is huge. And one of the things, just along these same lines, we're always researching and learning and studying students on Zeemee. And last year's high school seniors, I can't remember the way we asked the question, but the response to the question, 89% of last year's high school seniors indicated that they expect to have made their good friends long before they arrive on campus. And so this is a component of that, right? So they're also going to see tons of matches that may not be their roommate, but are going to just be a part of that awesome friend group, once down the road they arrive on campus. And that's extremely important to these young people today. It's the days of when it was like for me in 1994 going off to Indiana University and, you would hope to make a friend by the end of the first semester. Those days are over. These young people today expect to have that friend group long before they get to campus.
I have to tell you, my introverted self, I just started sweating when you talk about, and you meet all of these people and you put it out there and it sounds like a dating app for college. Just makes me sweat. But I know you're right. I know that's how folks are doing it now.
Friends, this concludes part 2 of Lynda's interview with Sue Campbell. We hope you'll join us next week for part 3 of 4. On Thursday's episode, Julie and I will be discussing a College Vine article on what to do if you're deferred or waitlist. How do you write a letter of continued interest? Part 1 of 2. Susan will join me for our question from a listener, which is question 100 from Kathy from California. and she wants to know, why are some high schools moving away from the AP curriculum? And for our interview, we'll have our final segment with Marissa Salazar, who's over all visitation programs at Colorado College, and we'll be discussing virtual tours. And friends, I know I said this the other day, but I've been thinking about this quote a lot, and I leave it with you one more time. That hard work beats talent when talent refuses to work hard. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Lynda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Lynda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.